Hello, Chris. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, good. Just coming off the back of just all the things I do for the website. How are you?
I'm pretty great. I'm just so thrilled to meet you. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I just took a look at my Gmail account and our first correspondence was back in 2019. That was like you're pretty much a Y Logic Pro Rules OG. Just 2 years into it.
What's OG?
Like original gangster.
Oh,
You're like
really?
one of the first ones. Yeah.
I am. I definitely am. I've always loved Logic since 2005. When did you start using yours?
Ooh, it was Logic Pro 8 and I
Yeah.
always mix up dates and times, but I think 2008 as well, maybe.
Yeah.
I'd have to look back, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a while now.
What an expert you've become on it, though. Just it's staggering. I mean, as long as I've been using it, every time I watch one of your videos, I'm amazed at what else it can do.
Oh, well, thank you, thank you. A lot of trial and error, and I just committed a little more trial and error than others had time for.
That's astounding. Did they ever take on some of your ideas and ask you to troubleshoot some things or help them out?
Oh, Apple?
Yeah,
No, no. That's
because
if they ever come out of the ether to have a chat with me, I will be so excited.
because I thought you had tried to make some suggestions and they weren't really responding.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I submit to the feedback form just like anybody else because
Oh,
Apple
okay.
has the very nondescript, just like tell us what the problem is.
Yes.
So I've made suggestions, but
Hmm.
maybe something has been implemented and I don't know. But nonetheless, I think they're doing a great job.
So how's the channel going? I can remember when before it was even monetized and you were giving us all this great stuff for free and I was saying you've got to find a way to make money for this because you're
Yeah.
such an expert on it.
Well, thanks. It's going good. It's going good. It's a juggling act, and I'm trying to get better at the juggling because as one progresses and gains more, I guess, attention of other folks on the internet,
Hmm.
more and more people want access and time and help, and I have a hard time managing all that. But nonetheless, I do my best. I just try to put my best foot forward and help as many people as I can.
Wow.
But the channel is just shy of 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.
That's
Uh,
incredible.
I never thought I would get to 1,000. I thought this was purely a for fun thing for me. I didn't
Yeah,
expect so many people to identify with it, which is really cool.
that is awesome. Yeah, I was just talking to Wheats Gurkenhauser this morning, and he's on, White Sea Studios, and he's just amazed at how many followers and stuff he's got, subscribers as well. And I started my channel back in what, '06 or '07, before there was a subscription bell and before you asked for people to subscribe and stuff. And I have over 200,000 views on certain videos, but hardly any subscribers. So I'm
Sure.
mystified by the whole process.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there's that sort of expectation at this point, that sort of
Mm,
smarmy, like, subscribe, ring the bell type of thing. I've been very proud to not do that.
I've never done it
Um,
either.
not to put down anybody who chooses to be that explicit about subscribing, but
Mm.
I don't know. I try to keep it as friendly as I possibly can, as personable as I can, and just try to go based on try to win people over based on that particular aspect.
Yeah. I felt like it was getting to be pretty obvious as a thing that everybody was saying, kind of like wait for the tone and leave a message. So I thought they know what to do if they care to. And I don't have any specific thing that I do on my channel. It's like I'm an artist, I do all kinds of things. I even love miniature dachshunds. There's kind of a smorgasbord of stuff on there.
Yeah,
In a
sure.
way, too, I almost wear too many hats because I'm a songwriter, but I like to produce and arrange, and I like to record, and I like to master, and I like to play with toys and, all the microphones and whatever's we're talking about. And so I don't think anybody would come to my channel for anything in particular unless they're looking for some kind of guitar teaching or something.
Sure, that makes sense. I did narrow my focus after several attempts at blogs and on YouTube channels
Mm,
where I've eventually figured out. how to focus on something and be that deliberate in the title and the messaging, and that seemed to help considerably because I used to operate under the name Brass Palace Recording, which what does
Oh,
that even mean really? Besides the fact that recording's in the title. And then I would post articles to help people with recording. And it's like, well, but aren't I the recording guy? And so it took me a while to figure that out.
good for you.
Probably the best decision I ever made was the name of the channel. That's really gave me a clear focus and I think gave
Yeah.
everybody a clear idea of what I was about.
Yeah. I think that the title is great, and I still haven't found any other DAW that I think rivals Logic either.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, at this point, I'm not gonna jump ship even if I wanted to, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to because I'm so pleased with Logic and I'm so pleased with the trajectory that Apple is, the effort that Apple has invested in the application. I think it has grown by leaps and bounds in ways that I understand that other tools might be better suited for professional applications just because of the need to be compatible with other studios, other teams, but Logic,
Mhm.
I think, is bananas for what you get for $200 if you bought it 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, which we did. And,
yeah,
it's interesting because for a while there, I was keeping up with every update, and then all of a sudden, my computer was just freaking out, and I'm on the phone with Apple, and the rep is going, "Well, you're trying to operate at 300 CPU, so this is just insane. Like, you need a new computer." So it's really like if you keep updating everything and updating all your plugins, it's going to get to the point where the computer can't handle it. And if you don't keep up, then you got to take that computer offline.
it's
And
true.
like so many of the plugins have these built-in go out and look for the update, and if you don't update, things start going crazy too. So I was keeping the computer offline. I made the big mistake just last week of taking the iLock 2 out of its USB input and put it in a different one, thinking I was consolidating cables and whatever's, moving stuff around. And all of a sudden, it's forgotten everything. And it wants to go back online and reauthorize so many things. And some things are working and some things aren't. And I didn't know so much havoc could happen just by removing the iLock for a second and it wanting to go back online to find everything. Have you
Yeah,
ever heard of such a thing?
I honestly didn't know that myself, but I run into, I'll take the iLock out, I'll start a project up, and then it's screaming at you because where'd the iLock go? And then have
Yeah,
to go through some trial and error to make it remember there is an iLock, eventually plug back in.
yeah.
There's always a tricky bit or two when
Tricky,
dealing with
crazy.
music on a computer.
You make music too. You're not just teaching Logic. I mean, you are a
Um,
recording engineer, but you also play instruments and compose and
Yeah, I've been composing an album for the last like 4 years with my buddy Ben. It's very hip hop centric. It's our best interpretive dance of hip hop because
oh wow,
I grew up like listening to punk rock and very guitar driven music. I'm
nice.
functional on a guitar and bass, but I haven't really played with any sort of dedication in a long time. I'm mostly focused on the production side of
Yeah,
mixing, editing, and recording.
that's really fun. All of those things are super fun.
Yeah.
When did you realize I'm a recording engineer? I have to be a musician. What was your background like?
Uh, well, I started playing in punk bands from about high school on, playing bass because we already had a guitarist between me and my best friend. He played guitar, so my job was to play bass, and I didn't even know how to play an instrument, so I had to get a bass and learn how to, and get my hands working in the right direction.
That's
And
great.
we started a punk band that went through various permutations, various variations of as we got more familiar with different ideas of punk rock and hardcore and similar things. We wanted to do all the different things. And then I played in a variety of bands after high school, touring up and down the East Coast and around the Midwest. And we went to a studio I'm in Rochester, New York, Western New York, and Buffalo is about an hour away. And we went to a studio in one of my bands, a guy named Doug White, who had Watchman Studios. I think he still operates it, but we went. Doug is so cool. And I remember looking around the studio at the mixing board, at the speakers, everything, and just thinking to myself, this is amazing. I would want to do this all day, every day if I could. But my immediate next reaction was, I have no idea how I would afford any of this. Like, no time in my life will I have the money for any of this. So I continued playing in bands. But this was around the time that more and more folks were making music on computers, using DAWs, purchasing like Personas Fire Studios, cheapy interfaces.
Right.
And it got to a point where I was in a band. My buddy who introduced me to Logic Pro, his name was Jordan, is Jordan, keep saying was. And he just brought the studio with him. He brought an iMac to our rehearsal space with a Fire Studio interface and Logic Pro. And that blew my mind. It was like, oh, well, you can just record anywhere at this point.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided I'm going to try to figure this out on my own. With Jordan's help, he suggested I get Logic, that I get a Mac, certain gear. And then
Nice.
I moved to New York City for a few years with my girlfriend, and all the jobs I've ever worked have been very retail, customer service, that sort of. I
Oh,
never
wow.
went to college or anything. I was very much invested in the idea of being a musician, being a creative. So I worked at maybe the busiest coffee shop in New York. It was a great, fantastic learning experience. It taught me so much about customer service that I would not have gained anywhere else.
Oh,
And
sure.
I would say, why Logic Pro rules, being a mix engineer, recording engineer, it's all customer service. So they taught me a lot, but at the time I was miserable at that coffee shop. So I thought to myself, I got to figure out a way to make money outside of this.
Mm.
And so with my MacBook and my Fostex mono speaker, I was like, all right, I'm going to try to figure out how to be a mix engineer and charge money to do this.
Wow.
And that started that trajectory. It took a long time, but I eventually figured it out.
That is so cool. And
Yeah.
so that's the main gist of your business, and is being the actual recording studio, not just running this YouTube channel.
Yeah. I focus more on mixing these days than
Hmm.
recording,
Cool.
which I love recording. Uh, I would say that, at least in the circles that I'm hanging out with, the experience of going to a studio and recording has changed a lot from when I was 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
Where you would like book the studio for a week and you would go to the studio and you'd live there and you get the thing done. And now it's like a weekend warrior type of thing where, okay, we'll record drums this weekend and then bass next weekend. And then, well, I got some stuff going on 2 weeks from now. We can do some guitars. And then 6 months later, the record's finally done, which no hate, but mixing was a little easier and faster, I suppose. It was like you get it done to the extent that you're happy with it, and then I'll take it the rest of the way there.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're probably doing some full mixing, but also some stems.
Yeah, I have the luxury, thanks to why Logic Pro rules, that mainly Logic Pro users reach out to me. And so I can say, hey, just send me your project as
Hmm.
is.
Yeah.
And they send it to me. And if I have questions or concerns or anything, we can discuss that and we can kind of work through some of those things. But otherwise, it's like I just pick it back up from where you left off and I just get going. And it's really a wonderful experience, as opposed to, hey, this is how you bounce multi-tracks. This is how you bounce stems. Oh no, you
Mm.
normalized them. We need to go back. Oh, you left the reverb on. Can we take that off the vocals? Don't have to deal with any of that stuff.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. And so you don't really have too much trouble with plugins being compatible or folks sending you things that you don't have.
Yeah. I'm trying, as you can probably empathize with, I've spent a lot of money on gear over the years. So I'm trying to be more frugal about spending money on plugins and such. And I'll try to get by if somebody sends me a project. I don't feel like buying the whole Waves bundle. So I'll just see if I can get by. But if
Yeah.
there's a crucial effect that is like, this is crucial to that sound, then I'll go purchase it. Otherwise, I'll try to operate on demos or trials. But I have a bunch of software of my own
Yeah.
as well.
And a
So
lot
there's,
of the plugins are imitating other plugins that we have that do similar things.
yeah.
Yeah. I guess I didn't do enough research when I started over onto Logic. I went from 4 ADAT machines to Logic in 2005, and I didn't realize that Logic had its own plugins. So because I got
Oh,
an
wow.
Apollo interface, they give you a bunch of plugins, and then they give you a voucher for even more plugins, so I just was getting, and then a friend gave me a whole bunch of Waves plugins, and it's been insane. And yet, as much as I love them, it's like the hardware seems to never go wrong, the plugins need
Interesting.
updates and sometimes don't interact and play well with each other, but the hardware is pretty cool, and the hardware still seems so different, like I like playing with the buttons, but there's also, wow, I think I really hear the tubes here, like stuff like that is really pretty cool. But I love it all. And the only thing is, I can be like fully analog on this side with that 1-inch 16 track behind me.
Hmm.
And I could be totally in the box with Logic, or I can do some kind of a hybrid thing. And I've made my life a little too complicated because I didn't know how to set up any of this. And I've been sort of guessing at things and looking at manuals and watching videos from everybody and then trying to route everything because, in Logic, all the virtual tracks get all crazy. Oh my God. It's been interesting.
Yeah, that's cool that you have that experience because I grew up, I was like in my 20s, I guess, going into my 30s, but I grew up on a computer and that was the thing
Mm,
I had. And outboard gear is completely not a thing in my trajectory. I mean, maybe studios used outboard gear, but I had no direct experience with any of it. So
lucky
that's
you, though.
actually
It
quite
helped
a
you save money.
yeah, well, but it's kind of a foreign concept to me. Obviously, I'm much more aware now, and especially
Mm,
with companies like Universal Audio, Apogee, Waves that are, doing emulations. Yeah, I get it now, but I just never had that direct experience to have to plug a console into Logic and like get everything playing together.
mm.
Yeah.
I didn't know the high end stuff. I didn't know what an 1176 was back in 2005, or, a Fairchild or any of those things. When I was mixing on a big Studio Master Track Mix 32 mixer with 4 ADATs or the half-inch 8-track machine and making albums with that tape deck, we would just rent compressors, but they were like, Alesis 3636, and, or
Yeah.
3036, and, DBX 160s and things like that. They were very low end, whatever that person had who was renting out gear, that little
Sure.
business that I used to go to. And so when all the plugins started coming in, there was a lot to learn. It's like, what plugin is this? What does it do?
That's fascinating to me.
It is fascinating, even to me still. I think any one of these rabbit holes are very interesting, and people have said to me ever since I was a kid, like, well, you should decide what you really want to do. Do you want to sing or play guitar? So
Mm.
now it's even worse because it's like I play a lot of other instruments. And I like to be the artist, but I like to be the engineer, but I like to arrange and produce, but I also like to mix and master. And people are like, why are you doing all of that? It takes a while to finish things, but I like the vision. I like painting the whole painting myself sometimes. And it's just fun, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting because we're in an industry that those jobs and those roles are consolidating further and further where you are expected to be the recording engineer and the melodyne, pitch correction guy or
Right?
gal. Plus, you got to mix it. Plus, you got to do the Atmos version. Plus, you got to do this, that, and the other thing. So it's interesting that that was the perspective that you were like, pick one. I feel like that's very different now where you have to almost do all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of them have become blurred defining labels too. Like, I used to think George Martin was a great producer because he was a great engineer, but to me, arranging and producing were still separate things. And now
Mm,
they're really getting blurred.
yeah, absolutely.
uh, but I don't know. It's still fun. It's still fun to like it all. And I don't think our diverse interests have hurt us any. If anything, they've made us more valuable and have helped. Like we have a deeper understanding of the entire picture, what needs to be done, and we can really help artists get there, which is cool.
Absolutely. I would agree wholeheartedly. A couple years ago, I didn't know anything about a synthesizer. I didn't know what any of the knobs did. And I was actually kind of petrified trying to get into that end of production. I would say I'm much more functional now, and it's exciting and it's cool to be able to, if you're working with a, an artist, be able to be like, oh well, we should try this and quickly dial up something that's kind of interesting and fun for them to then take the ball and run with it.
Mm,
Um, I agree with you, and then I think it just adds to the toolkit.
yeah, yeah. I don't think it's a problem. But there
Mhm.
are people who are very expert at one or two things. And they look at some of the diverse people thinking, what makes you think you can do all of that? It really takes an expert to really know what's going on. And you're not really an engineer unless you've worked 2 years under such and such in a professional studio with real artists and, you know, gold record, this and that. And it's like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm not the real thing, but like how real does it have to be? This song didn't exist before. It turned out from this little idea to turn into a finished thing, and now it's out in the world as a finished record. It's like that's still pretty miraculous and fun. Like whether it's real or not in somebody else's book, it's like I love that music is back in the hands of the people, that
Yeah,
everybody can have fun with it, that there isn't this hierarchy of you're a pro and you're not a pro and you're not in it. And, because folks can get a little weird like that, like everything is this elusive club that you don't belong to. And it's like, well, let's just start our own club.
yeah, yeah. Well, I would immediately point to a number of like I read Sound on Sound magazine
Hmm.
routinely, like every night, and I have a subscription. And the articles that are coming out uh, about the latest hit, a lot of these songs are like SoundCloud artists that just throw a song up and then it gets a lot of interest and then a label signs them. And then, holy cow, I mean, the Billie Eilish first record
Mm-hmm.
was recorded in their bedroom. And yeah, they eventually hired out for mixing, but I don't know. I was reading an article about a rapper where they recorded the vocals on tour in a car. Inside, they had the vocalist in the car rapping, and that was the final take. It's just, I don't know.
That's great.
I appreciate working really hard at your craft
Mm-hmm.
and investing a lot in your craft and being prideful of that. Makes sense. Uh, but you can't stop the tides of change,
Exactly.
and there's a lot of creativity out there, and it's just a case of providing the tools that people can use to get that out, get it out of them. I don't think there's a right or wrong there.
No, I agree with you. I love that things have become so much more affordable and that there have been consumer versions of all these things. Because I got my first TIAC 2340 when I was 17, and that was just, oh my God, this is exciting.
Yeah.
How fun. But I remember reading Carol Burnett's first book, and she was in that conundrum of, I need an agent, but you can't get an agent unless you have some kind of a part that somebody's interested in you and giving you for a play or particular show or whatever. And she's like, well, how do you get this if you don't have that? And you can't have this if you. So she was just told, why don't you just put on your own show? And they did that. Her and her friends just hired out a theater, put together a whole production, invited all the press and all the agents and manager people, and life began. So back in 1989, with my first band, Too True, it was like, we'll put out our own record, we'll put our money where our mouth is, and we'll just go for it and have some fun. And we got some really great international press. And in those days, home and studio recording and Rolling Users Group magazine and all these things, it was so easy to just get somebody on the phone and have them interested, because doing something at home wasn't that pronounced, I guess. It wasn't happening that often. And I had had a book called How to Make and Sell Your Own Recording from the 70s, when I was growing up. And then a whole bunch of years later in the 80s, I heard George Winston, the piano player, say, well, there was a book in the music business that really changed my life and helped me. It's like the Bible of self releases and stuff. And I'm like, oh, what is it? What is it? I should know. And it's the same book that I had, How to Make and Sell Your Own Record by Diane Rappaport. And there's probably a newer version now, even because at that time there was, now the digital age remake and whatever. But it just made things so possible for everybody. And I wasn't the first by any means. James Taylor was recording at home. Les Paul and Mary Ford were doing stuff at home. Like it goes way, way back. And just to be able to hear all your ideas together, what an amazing, exciting thing. And now not to have any tape hiss, because Logic is so great. It's like
Yeah.
very happy to not have tape hiss.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the guitarist in my high school band, he had a Fisher Price. Remember those? Like the speaking had the little
Yes.
microphone and he would tape the button on the microphone so it was always on and then he would hit record and recording his idea and then we would play over it with other ideas and just that was at that time monumental. It's just like, wow, we can hear almost the song while we're listening to it.
Right.
And then to be at this point where you could record something on your iPhone and then just
Yes.
like port it to Logic and then start slicing it up and singing along to it. And then pretty soon an afternoon has gone by and you have a song to show people.
Yeah.
I'm um I'm just blown away and enthused endlessly by the opportunities available to people. And that's my goal is to show people that the because a lot of folks understandably have troubles with technology when
Mm,
they're trying to accomplish something in something like Logic and they don't have endless amounts of time to go researching and reading through manuals
right.
and getting to know the software. So I'm always trying to help people understand that the only difference here is that like, your gap in knowledge. You don't know how to do the thing,
Mm,
and let's try to get you over that hump so you can just keep going and do your thing. And it's not a case of like the software can't do what you want it to, which sometimes is the perception. It's like, oh, well, Ableton's better, Logic's better. And,
mm.
maybe it's my own fault that I called the channel Why Logic Per Rules. I kind of stuck my flag in the sand and drew a line. Um, but at this point, it can all pretty much do what you want it to do. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, figuring out how to make it do that thing.
They've all caught up because
Yeah.
for a while Logic was the only one with the built-in synthesizers and various sounds, and then everybody started adding that, and then one would record MIDI, but it wouldn't record audio, and then they changed that. So they are, I think, getting pretty leveled and equaled out. But I think one of the coolest things about a DAW is that, like you said, you can start something like a little demo and turn it into a finished tune, and the quality's there. Whereas when I would just write a song when I was a kid, I had little cassette decks. And so I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cassettes of little ideas, like we have voice memos now on our phones,
Yeah.
and finished songs. But those are the only versions of those songs that exist. And thankfully, those tapes all still play.
Yeah.
But if you do that in Logic, that reference vocal can turn out to be the real thing, and you can add drums 20 years later. So
Absolutely.
it's really, really cool.
It is
But
so
yeah,
cool.
you are so great at explaining things. Your voice is so soothing. You're smart. You're concise with the stuff. You make a great blog post on it. Then you do videos on it. It's like you could be, and I mean you, anybody now, could be entertained just going through all your videos on your channel on YouTube or on your webpage and just learn a ton, or even just plug in any particular question. And usually there's something right there about it that just helps them very quickly get right to that point. And so I just really wanted to publicly thank you for that, because I have loved your channel for years. And I just think it's so cool that you've been so graceful and generous. I mean, with your time and doing that for everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that means a lot to me. Um, and it's nice to hear. I mean, lots of people say lots of kind things, and
Mm.
I appreciate it all. And maybe I don't express it enough out on the internet. But it's cool to hear. Thank you. Uh, it's taken time and effort to learn how to articulate, learn how
Mm.
to describe things at such a pace that is helpful to people. I just had a commenter today that I had two commenters. I have one that said, "This was amazing," because I just posted a video today and someone was like, "This is amazing. Thank you so much, Chris."
Mm.
And then someone else commented, "This is just painfully tedious to watch." And,
Oh, gee.
so that's like two sides of one coin.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the balance I'm always trying to figure out because one user's, you know, tedious is another user's too fast. And like one person's this is awesome is like another person's get to the point. So I'm always learning, I'm always trying to adapt and learn. You probably can appreciate that as well because as an educator, trying to accommodate everybody's um, learning patterns.
Yes. But if
Yeah,
they already like your teaching style, then they would know with their learning style whether they're drawn to your work or not. And if it's just from a YouTube channel, you're at a disadvantage. You don't know who your students are. And having them be everybody is enormous. There's no consensus. You will never please every single person. You'll never hit it right for every single person because everybody's starting from a different place, you know?
that's absolutely true. And that's something that I myself have wrestled with actually for the last year or two is
Hmm.
it's interesting when you start a YouTube channel or a website. Uh and initially when like the website goes from 0 views a month to like 100 and you're like, "Wow, this is amazing. I can't believe this is happening." And then you go from like 100 to 1,000 and it's like, "This is the best thing ever." You're just I myself, I'm speaking for myself, I was just so pleased and wow, this thing that I have tried to will into existence seems to want to happen. I don't know where it occurred, but at a certain amount of tens of thousands of people, it's like, oh, the things that I say are have an impact and they matter, and people are hanging on. Some people are hanging on my every word, and if I am a little too flippant in the way that I describe something,
Mm,
someone may take that as just inaccurate, not uh thoughtful enough, whatever. So
mm.
I've had to wrestle with this fact that I've increasingly become a public figure, even though I'm just talking to myself to my iPhone every week by myself 90% of the time. Um, so it's interesting, but I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate being able to learn how to better help other people.
Mm.
Yeah.
Are you using just your iPhone to film?
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you do ScreenFlow or which one?
Yes. I
That's the
use
one?
I use ScreenFlow. I use another intermediary app called uh, what's it called? Camo by Reincubate.
Oh.
It's an application that allows you to I can plug my iPhone into my Mac and ScreenFlow will grab that feed.
Mm.
Um, but I, just like anybody else, I've dealt with technical mishaps with ScreenFlow, where
Mm-hmm.
ScreenFlow will have, I don't know, the feed from my camera will be not as pristine or kind of jagged. Weird things happen on occasion. So I ran into Reincubate's Camo application, which you load the app on the phone and on your Mac, and I'm able to record the feed from my phone simultaneously while I'm recording it on ScreenFlow. So if the visual of myself in ScreenFlow is not up to standard, I've got a secondary version that I can load right in, and that's usually what I load in to ScreenFlow, and then I chop everything up in ScreenFlow. I think folks would be quite surprised how many hundreds of edits there are for every video because
Sure.
I go through a sentence at a time in different, I say it with an upturn voice, with a downturn voice, with was this the best way I could have expressed this? Let me try it again. I'll have like an hour of footage that I chop down to 15 minutes. And then I load
Wow.
it into Logic and I mix the audio in there and spit it
Mm.
back out to load to YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so happy to see that Logic would extract video or audio from a video because when these chats just started, I was just talking to friends and trying to get to meet people I've only emailed and never got to actually physically meet. And someone said, "Oh, so this is a show then?" I'm like, "It's a what?" You know, and they're like, "Oh, you're making a podcast." I'm making a what? So to get the audio right over to a podcasting site, there was a couple of companies making apps that would extract just the audio, but you could only do free for like half hour, 40 minutes, and some of these were like 2 hours. I'm like, uh, there's got to be a better way. And it turns out even DaVinci Resolve will export just the audio, let alone Logic. So it was good to find those things out too. It's like, oh, this is how you can do it.
Yeah, it's a huge help. Um,
Yeah.
for I'll for my own workflow, I spit out the video with the audio examples separate from my voiceover because I like to do not a lot of processing, but a lot of cleaning up of my voiceover because
Mm,
the space that I'm in is just some generic office on a main street in Rochester, New York, and there's a lot of commotion outside, and there's like
mm.
ambient air conditioning that actually is quite loud. There's like a tone rate at about somewhere between 200 and 1,000 hertz. It's just like, brrr, and I have to eliminate that. And it's taken a while, but I use an app called Hush,
Okay.
which is relatively new. It's an AI based app. I'm going to put it out there. I'm completely freaked out by AI. I'm not excited about it, but this app eliminates noise like nothing I've ever experienced before.
Without the artifacts and weirdness and
It's so awesome.
wow.
And you purchase it from the App Store. And I've spoken to the developer. He's a great guy. And then once I denoise the voiceover, I throw it into RX to remove plosives, to remove mouth noises, to clean
Mm-hmm.
up any ticks or weird stuff.
Yep.
And then I load it into Logic. And then I combine the two together and I get levels right. And I like to use with my processing chain for my voice.
Right. So Hush is on your phone or on
It's
the app
actually on the
on
Mac.
Logic?
It's on the Mac. It's a separate application. It's very uh not very obvious the workflow. You decide where do I want the denoised version to spit out. So I say my desktop. And then you say, how much denoising do you want? 0 to 100%. I set it to 70%.
Hmm.
And then you drag and drop the file right in, and then it spits it out to the desktop, and it sounds awesome.
Pristine.
Pristine in terms of noise reduction and getting rid
Wow.
of weird, even bird noises, it'll get rid of. I have a right outside on the awning here, there's like a nest of robins that like to chirp the entire time I'm filming. It's crazy how uncanny they figure out the timing.
They're feeling all this warmth and concern and caring coming, energy coming through the walls. They go, "This is a nice place to perch for a while. It's
Yeah.
making me want to sing."
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
That's funny. Oh God. So, how many mixes do you need to do a week or a month? It probably varies, but you're probably
It
very busy with that kind of thing.
it varies, definitely. The channel is honestly consumes a lot of my time now.
Yeah,
I put a lot of time into a video.
I bet.
So I'll maybe get 1 to 3 tracks done a week. I couldn't see much beyond that because the workflow of putting together a video is like
Mhm.
sometimes a lot of like, what am I going to talk about this week? And then researching and identifying and then testing out, my
Mm.
workflow and is there a better way to do it? But yes, to answer your question, maybe 1 to 3 songs a week. And then I also work on my own projects and the channel as well.
Yeah. What were some of your goals when you realized I'm a recording engineer now? I'm doing this thing before the YouTube channel.
Yeah, my goal was very what's the best way to put it? It was just very selfish, for lack of a better word, in that I want to earn money from a musical gig and not have to work jobs that I've been working, that have felt like I needed to work, but I don't want to work. So it's
Right.
very like money motivated. But of course, I've been a lifelong musician, creative. I can't see I've tried to say, when I'm done with music, I'm gonna go get a job doing whatever.
Really?
And about a year later, I'm like, I hate this so much. I got to get back to what I'm attracted to. So it's been, yeah,
It's
exactly.
like-
Exactly. So the goal was, I would say monetary based, but I also have I'm like a tinkerer,
Mm,
so audio, when I first got into recording my own music with Logic Pro, the world is like this endless it's endless opportunity. It's like I can record a guitar and I can record drum kit in my living room, and
Mhm.
now I can put it all together into a complete picture, and then the complete picture sounded like garbage. And I was like, "Why does this sound not even remotely in, you know, why does it not meet my aspirations for it?" So that really scratched an itch for me of like, I want to learn how what a compressor is, what an EQ is. How do you use
Mm,
reverb effectively? How do I
nice.
edit my vocals to sound natural but good? Whatever. Um, and as a result, I've just gotten to continue down that path of tinkering and learning. And anytime there's a Logic update, I'm like, yes, this is the best day ever. I can't wait to find out what live loops are, or how Atmos works, or this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah. But then how are your Macs keeping up with all the updates? You're just gonna keep updating the Mac as well?
Well, sure. I stuck with a 2012 MacBook Pro right up
Really?
until they announced the first wave of Apple Silicon Macs.
Mm,
And the MacBook was getting long in the tooth. I'd try to do some editing or whatever. Or if I try to bounce a song out, a mix out, it would be like, okay, this is taking a while. And they
mm.
announced the Apple Silicon Macs, and I said, okay, I mean, this is obviously the future. Right now, we're still in getting to enjoy Rosetta if you're working with applications or plugins that are not Apple Silicon native, but Apple's gonna kill it at some point. Like Rosetta's gonna go away. So I just said,
Ooh,
I'm gonna get a Mac Mini. That to me feels like a good place.
okay.
So I got the 2012 Mac in 2012. I had a white clamshell before that until that became non-functioning. And now I'm running the Mac Mini for the last couple of years. And honestly, for being the first generation Apple Silicon, M1, 16 gigs of RAM, a
Mm,
terabyte hard drive, I think it performs like a champ. I'm very
that's
pleased with
awesome.
it.
Doesn't
Yeah,
get too hot.
never.
Yeah.
I mean, the fan is always running, but the
Mm.
fan is just absolutely silent. It's
I have a
awesome.
2019 Intel, and it gets so hot that it loses its mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I
It's
guess
sitting
that's
on two fans and surface height things that I've got, and if I pull them out to be able to cut vocals and forget to plug them in, I got to wait for everything to cool down because it's like painting weird and shaking and
oh man, you if
having a
if I
heat
may
stroke, I guess.
yeah, if I may make the recommendation, and if you're not in a position of having to be um mobile, the Mac Minis are awesome. And if you
Yeah,
have to be mobile, I'm even considering a MacBook Air because I don't know. I mean, they're thin, they're light, and as far as I've been able to tell, they're just as capable. I
yeah.
mean, more than capable than the Intel MacBook Pros. But the Mac Mini is awesome. I love it.
One of my students was talking about, I think, the Mini and how cool it stays and it never heats up and he doesn't have trouble with anything. And I thought, well, now I'm doing video too. Would that be good for video? Would that be good for, must be if you're using it.
Working great for me. Yeah, and now we're
Yeah.
on the M2 Mac Minis. So
Mm.
you can upgrade the memory. I can't remember. Is it 32 gigs? A little more, but now you
So you're
can
not,
get even more with it.
so you're not using DaVinci Resolve or something like that. You're doing all your video editing in ScreenFlow?
Yes, it is a point of contention for me.
Oh, why?
So this is gonna be the most candid I've ever been about any piece of software. ScreenFlow is a great application. It allows
Yeah,
you to film your iPhone camera, plus your Mac screen, plus your audio interface inputs, plus an iPad if you have it connected to the screen. You can record just about anything.
yeah, like four or
Um,
five things at once.
absolutely. So thank you, Telestream, for all of that functionality. Editing in ScreenFlow is a miserable endeavor by my standards. And that is because, when you open Logic or Pro Tools or whatever, the first time you maybe open a project, the audio waveforms have to draw themselves the very first time, so it's like, oh, it's populating. And then forevermore, when you make an edit, whatever, the waveforms just stay put. In
Hmm.
ScreenFlow, when you slice or what I'll call a region, but it's probably called a clip,
Hmm.
it has to redraw the waveform
Oh.
every time you make an edit. And it
Oh.
is, so I would spend when I was doing the newbie to ninja series, which is something I started in January this year to kind of like challenge myself to get back to
Mm,
basics.
mm.
I was editing on my 2012 MacBook at home because I didn't feel like being at the studio at midnight. And I would just sit there for like an hour waiting for things to redraw as I'm editing. And I would be up till 3 or 4 in the morning just trying to get a video done because I convinced myself to do a daily video. And
You're
so,
waiting on the software. Not
so I'm
cool.
saying all that in hopes that maybe someone from Telestream ends up watching this. Otherwise, I would edit in a separate program, but
Mm,
sometimes the export process out of ScreenFlow for like the raw, the full Monty of like an hour of footage can take a
mm.
long time as well. So then it's kind of like, well, I know how to work in this, so I might as well just keep going.
True, because
Yeah.
if you have to render something, it could take an hour or more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it just
Did you?
seemed more time efficient.
That's cool. Did you start with the demo of ScreenFlow or just hop right into the full version?
Probably. I think I just hopped into the full version because I became aware that that was the software that a lot of these YouTuber tutorial folks would use. So it just seemed like that was probably the next logical step for me.
Yeah, I was about to do that probably about 6 months ago because I had done the demo and I liked it. But as soon as my system read it as an option, if it wasn't operating, it would throw off all the aggregate devices. It was like everything, it wanted everything all the time. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is confusing the issue. Did you have any troubles like that?
Um, there was some hiccups early on. Telestream devised their own audio device, like a virtual device.
Oh,
So in Logic for the output, because there would be problems where ScreenFlow is not capturing the audio from Logic Pro. So
hmm,
they came up with their own software driver. So you would just say in the output section of the audio preferences, like use the Telestream audio device.
right.
But I would run into problems with that too. So what I do is actually I assign a set of outputs on my interface. Like Apogee interfaces have a whole bunch of virtual like outputs and buses you can use. So I just say, okay, on outputs 33 and 34,
Hmm,
uh, send all the audio from Logic through that as if I was sending it to my speakers. And then in
hmm,
and then in ScreenFlow, I'm able to monitor and see basically I just record the output through the interface instead of through Telestream's driver. That's a lot
oh,
of technical
oh,
mumbo jumbo, but
okay. So it's coming in like just tracks of audio.
exactly.
Cool. That sounds
Exactly.
like a way to do it. Yes.
Yeah, but I should point out that on the Mac Mini, the Apple Silicon Mac Mini ScreenFlow is a lot faster. It does have to redraw every time you make an edit. You split
Mm.
things up, but it's a lot faster than 2012 MacBook at midnight at my apartment.
Yeah, yeah. I know even DaVinci Resolve gets weird on this
Yeah.
Mac, which is another MacBook Pro, and you go to move something and nothing happens, and then it jumps three
Mm,
moves later and things like that. So I keep trying to take everything off of here and get it onto a hard drive so that I could actually operate.
sure. You know,
Yeah.
what's interesting about the Apple Silicon Macs now is that, like, I was working off a project, I was recording guitars here. I was working off my external hard drive, and it just like Logic just didn't want to get going.
Mm,
I moved the project that's actually quite big. I just moved it onto the desktop off the external drive.
mm-hmm.
Open it up, not a problem.
Great.
The common knowledge is, or the common recommendation is you have, the application running off the internal drive, you
Right.
have the project running off an external drive. I had both running on the internal. It didn't complain once.
That's
That's like
great.
how awesome these things are getting now.
That's great because this is all internal and it's still troublesome.
Yeah.
What camera are you using right now? Because you look fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It's an iPhone 12 mini.
Oh,
And I purchased it specifically for the camera because my previous
right.
iPhone was an iPhone SE, and it wasn't so the newer cameras are willing to adapt to low light situations. Like I have
Mm-hmm.
two ring lights facing me right now, but
Right.
my space is kind of dark. Uh in an effort to contain sound and whatnot, or keep sound out, whatnot.
Sure.
And the SE, I looked. There's some funny video shots of me where I look like I'm literally dying on camera because like, it just couldn't adapt to it. And this is awesome. The iPhone 12 mini,
Yeah.
it works a treat in low light situations.
So you're zooming on the iPhone,
Yeah,
and this is the quality of the camera because you're zooming on that instead of like
yeah,
me zooming on an iMac maybe.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It's awesome.
yeah. And they say sometimes the back camera is better than the front camera. Are you seeing yourself?
No, I'm not. It's the back camera.
It is the back camera.
Just because of that experience. I almost
Mm-hmm.
feel like the front camera is probably just as good as at this point, but I'm used to just staring at the back of it. I think it would be confusing for me to see myself on camera while I'm trying to express myself. I think I would be thrown off by it.
Yeah, I had to do a couple of different cable TV shows, and they had the whole place, just a big empty studio with one camera guy and a sound person. And basically, I was feeding them the sound. I said, take my guitar and vocal exactly as I send it to you. Don't do anything else to it. And they said, oh, good. You want to see yourself on all these monitors? And I was in like a half circle of myself. And I was like, definitely
Whoa.
not. No.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh no, I made that face again and I hate that expression. Or I saw my reflection over on that side. It's like, oh no, this side's better. You know, like,
Yeah.
that was like, yeah,
Absolutely.
turn those all off. Thank you.
Yeah, for the first couple years of the channel, I didn't have myself on camera because I was completely
I
freaked
remember.
out by the idea. Um, I just I don't know, it's a lot to put yourself out there on the internet to an ever increasing, audience, and it really freaked me out to think about people being like, "What the hell? That's what that dude looks like?" But eventually I got to a point where I just felt like the channel needed to evolve, and I was like,
Hmm.
"Well, this is one of those things that could evolve, is just to get over myself and say hi." So,
Yeah.
great. I did it. And then I learned a lot about lighting and camera work. And you've got an awesome, camera situation going. I checked out your Instagram briefly, and I saw the big light that you had, like the photographer like light box. And I was like, wow, that's more sophisticated. I gotta get on that.
They're kind of big, and what I didn't know is that they make some with dimmers and some without. And then I
Mm,
tried to buy the extra little dimmer adapter, and it works with some lights and doesn't work with others. So sometimes they just start strobing. And then there was a guy on YouTube that made these sort of pie plates with lights, and he showed you how you could just take a pie plate and turn this round thing into a light. So I did that, and it seems like the the dimmer switches are working with these lights that I made myself better, but they're hard to find a clip to make them angle where you want them.
yeah, sure. That's
And the
awesome.
boxes, I have one I just was able to finagle to stay up in the ceiling over there. So behind the Mac is a big one up in the ceiling to try to light the room a little bit more.
That's what's so cool about these creative endeavors is you learn to become adaptable.
Hmm.
At the front end of me trying to mix and record, I was, petrified. If something goes wrong, how am I gonna, figure my way out of it? And now it's like, I don't know. It's so cool that you just learn to deal with a situation and you make the best of it, and you can surprise yourself. And I feel
Hmm.
like that's similar, learning logic, learning recording, mixing,
Yeah.
producing, arranging. I find it a source of tremendous fun.
I'm still fascinated by the fact that you're looking at the back of the camera.
Yeah.
Because sometimes with playing, it's like nice to be able to center yourself and see that the
Yeah.
whole guitar, you didn't cut off the guitar neck, and the body of the guitar is being seen, and they can see your strumming hand. And you must have it just set, like you know that you're getting the frame that you want, and you just don't move it again.
Oh, absolutely. I spent probably a good 5-10 minutes, picking
Testing it.
angles, like what would be best for folks. It's unfortunate that my computer screen is down here because I can't really be facing the camera. But
Hmm.
that was sort of that was a byproduct of the Atmos situation I have in here now. The screen has to get out of the way for the center speaker. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at you down here, but we're here.
So you're actually really mixing in Atmos.
Let let's let's not get too far ahead. I'm venturing into Atmos. I've mixed one
Okay,
track for an artist, and I'm very interested and intrigued by the whole thing. Um, and I'm starting to talk. What's interesting about Atmos is like you, myself, folks who are probably familiar with Logic or Pro Tools, like we're aware that Atmos is a thing.
sure.
Everyone I've talked to, consumer, artist, 99% of people have no idea what I'm talking about.
Really?
So I'm the one educating them. I'm saying, "Hey,
Oh,
would you be interested in this?" And they're like, I guess, So you got to get people sitting in the room and show them this is what stereo sounds like. This is what Atmos could sound like based on like I'll go into Apple Music and I'll go into settings and I'll flip between turning Atmos off and on because
mm,
artists, engineers have to provide two versions to streaming, the stereo version and the Atmos version, so they can
okay.
flip seamlessly between the two. And when folks go from Atmos to stereo and back, it's like, oh, that is actually pretty cool. But you don't really notice it until Atmos is
Mm,
turned off, until you go to the stereo version when it's just these guys. It's a subliminal thing, but I think it's pretty cool. It's subliminal in the sense of like you got to kind of tune your ears to the experience.
mm. I'm sure I would love it. I remember getting 5 of the same speaker a bunch of years ago and mixing in surround in Logic, but then I was so disappointed there was nothing to capture my 5.1 mix on so that I could bring it out to the car that I had at the time that had the ELS surround sound system in it.
Oh,
I was trying to
interesting.
record, bring my own music into my car to listen to it in surround, but I only had the test CD that came with the car and the Beatles' Love album. Like there was
Yeah.
nothing being released in 5.1. So what are they? It must be one of those. I think someone was saying it was like one of those U-matic cassettes that we used to have to make CDs off of, that they're capturing the Atmos on now.
Well, Atmos is similar, I would say, in the sense that you have to export at this moment in time using Logic Pro. You have to export. If I was going to share, let's say I mixed a track for you, Lauren,
Mm-hmm.
in Atmos, and you wanted to check it out, I would have to export one of the binaural rendered versions so that you could listen to it in headphones.
Okay.
I mean, I could send you the master ADM
Session.
BWF file. And if you have access to an Atmos studio somewhere on campus, then cool. Like you could bring it to that engineer or that space and say, hey, can you load this in Pro Tools? And it will load like as an Atmos mix and it'll work. And then you could check it out.
Oh
But
wow.
for the mass majority of folks who don't have access to facilities like you have,
Mm,
um, they're going to want to have headphones. They're going to have to listen in headphones because there's no other way to share it with them. If you're
yeah.
using the Dolby renderer that is not included natively in Logic Pro, but you've purchased the $299 renderer, you can spit out an MP4. That provides a little more versatility, just that you can punt it down to your iPhone. Still, you're going to use headphones, but maybe you could get it to play
Mm,
back on your Apple TV or something. I'm not sure on that front.
mm.
But similarly, it's like you're pretty much limited to headphone listening to check out your Atmos mix.
And aren't they trying to come up with headphones that would do Atmos better than others as well?
No doubt. I mean, I've been
Because they
listening.
only have the speakers they've got.
Sure. Yeah. I have no doubt about that. The interesting thing about the binaural renderers is that you don't need special headphones to
Mm,
listen.
okay.
Like you can plug your your earbuds or your Studio Pro headphones. You can use whatever headphone. And the
Okay.
binaural renderer creates this virtualized rendition of the Atmos mix. It
Oh.
decodes it at the user end. And so it plays back in headphones in what feels like something occurring around you and not just inside your head.
Mm,
Um, but I will say that the listening experience, in my opinion, is a lot more exciting and interesting and intriguing on something like the AirPods Max. Or I really
mhm.
like the AirPods Max because of the noise cancellation. You can just
Right.
turn off all external noise with a button,
Yeah.
and it sounds better to me in those than it does in my Sennheiser HD 600s. It
Really?
sounds more interesting, more believable, more intriguing to me.
The surround
Um,
does. I mean,
correct.
the
Yeah.
Atmos does. Yeah.
Yeah, the Atmos does. So, at the risk of that sounding like a pitch for all Apple products, that's not my intent. It's just that's the experience I have at this moment.
Do you know Tom Frampton, uh, uh, Mastering the Mix? He has a YouTube channel and does a lot of plugins.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Reference to
Yes, me
the
too. I like
plugin.
that. Love that.
E Expose, which is like a separate application you can drag your track and reference
Right.
tracks into and compare. I love that application.
Yeah.
Bass Room is a really cool plugin
Yep.
for
I like that
figuring
one
out the
too.
low end of your mixes. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of his stuff.
He had a speaker on his chair. It was, I guess, what gaming folks use to feel the low end and to feel the pressure of the low frequencies. He was talking about that recently. I was like, whoa,
Yeah, the sub pack,
that's what
which
it
I
is.
which I learned through him as well, through
Yeah.
his channel and his blog. I was
Yeah.
like, "Whoa, that's I never would have thought to do that, but that's super cool." It's
Yeah.
kind of like
That's it.
looking at the woofers on your speakers, and when they're shaking around like this, you're like, "Okay, I better round out some of that low end."
Now you're like, I'm getting an upset stomach. I guess I better up and fix my low
Yeah,
end.
yeah, but he makes great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And his most recent email, just learning that he's a drummer and a musician as well as a developer as well as an engineer. That's really cool. Kind of
Yeah,
like all of us, all doing fun things. But yeah, I wanted to bring that up just because of the sub pack there that you were talking about. Crazy,
yeah.
crazy. What keeps you inspired? I mean, how do you not? I mean, we all lose perspective. We all lose even common sense and or positive vibes about things. I mean, what brings you back to center?
Mm, that's interesting. I mean, a couple non-music practices
Mm-hmm.
and musical practices. I keep finding myself returning to meditation. I'm not necessarily a spiritual person, not to
Mm-hmm.
suggest that it's a spiritual practice, but I'm sure it can be for folks. But the idea of sitting for 20, 30 minutes focused on breathing or focused on just like the floating thoughts and letting them float by, that really
Mm,
helps me because I can be a very anxious person and it
me
helps
too.
me just end back up in the present moment. So that's something I keep returning to. Walks help a lot. When
Mm,
COVID happened and we were all sitting inside, I
mm.
almost forgot like, oh, you can go outside. You can walk around. Um, so that helps a lot. Uh, inspiration wise for music and creativity, I like to check out, what's not necessarily what's hot on, what's in the top 100
Mm,
songs on playlists, but I like to check out playlists to get a new sound to my ears, like a
mm.
new idea on a production. That helps me kind of get out of a funk where I feel maybe like I'm doing the same thing over and over.
Right.
Um, I find pop and hip hop production endlessly fascinating because they'll make use of anything. They'll make use of, slapping your thigh and throw it through a reverb and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it sounds like nothing resembling slapping a thigh or
Right.
someone yelling or whatever.
Yeah.
And that to me is just so inspiring just because like anything is available to create with. I would say for rock based genres, which I grew up on, punk rock, hardcore metal, these sort of things, I was very inspired by that for a long time. Eventually, you know, eventually for me, you come to identify how these things will operate time and time again. It's like you'll have drums in a particular fashion, you'll have bass tones in a particular fashion, guitars, etc.
Mm.
Um, and so I don't know. The point being is that I like sounds that I don't expect to happen.
Yes.
Because then it's like, whoa, well, if you can do that, maybe I can do this. And then
Sure.
we've all got the tools to do it.
That's cool. That's so cool. I know it is. It's all about the sound and the curiosity and taking our ears by surprise, whether it's in the writing or the arranging or the production or the mix. Or I love when things just sort of meld and blend and enhance each other in such a perfect way. It's like as soon as I start getting goosebumps or start crying, it's like that's it. That's what I was left after, like I didn't know I was going that way, but that's a keeper right there.
Yeah, there's
Nice.
but in a different direction as well because I'm so heavily computer based and I've done a lot
Mm,
of mixing over the last couple years as opposed to recording. Throwing a 57 in front of a guitar cabinet and getting that,
mm,
getting that right place.
mm.
Now the guitar just like flows out of the speakers is so inspiring. It's like, well,
Yeah.
all it took was a 57 in front of a Marshall half stack or whatever. And now it sounds bananas. And I get really excited by the texture. I would say I'm increasingly excited by textures of sound.
Yes.
Um, like the Mark Ronson live loops grid that came with Logic. There's a lot of warmth and there's a lot of that like Mark Ronson sort of vibe to those sounds. And that to me is like, whoa, this is so cool. This is nothing I experience on the daily.
Mm.
And that gets me going too. So it's not necessarily just made up sounds.
Are they enriched harmonics and like a little bit of overdrive distortion kind of sounds? What's happening with some of those samples?
Yeah, definitely. I would say all of the above what you said. I'm increasingly a big fan of that really fat snare drum sound. You throw like a
Yeah.
beach towel on the snare and it's like got just that thunk and it doesn't have that endless decay. I love that sound. That's a Beatles thing. That's what they were the
Yeah.
ones who
The
threw the
tea
first tea towel
towels.
on and
Yeah,
got
yeah.
that really nice tight sound. Love that. I love the
I have them
smack
on
of a
there all
big
the time.
fat kick.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, like Chad Blake would put a little bit of fuzzy stuff on almost everything and just like a house of cards, just make it perfect. Um, the Magnetmus, the Tegler Magnetmus piece of outboard gear is that. It's just a harmonics exciter, uh, fuzz distortion sort of generator, but it's like when you put it on a whole bunch of different things, it just enhances different frequencies and you can determine how much and blend it in and stuff. And all of a sudden the mix is like interesting. It's got
Yeah.
like some fuzz to it or meat or uh, like you say, texture. It's really, really cool. But
Yeah.
Chad was doing that with like a little Sans amp distortion guitar pedal on drums and basses and everything else back in the analog days.
Sure. Yeah. To that point, I think at this point, a lot of creatives that are using Logic Pro that are making music on a computer,
Hmm.
and just like how I started out, and maybe you started out, was you're just trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I use an EQ so this sounds good and not bad? And what's
Hmm.
like tasteful and what's thoughtful. And there's a long time of that. And eventually you have to give yourself permission because it's not going to be learned behavior necessarily for a lot of folks. They're not going to go intern at a studio and, get T orders for the next 5 years and learn through osmosis.
Right out.
Um, so eventually you have to give yourself permission to be like, it's okay to throw a drum kit through a Sans amp,
Yes.
you know? And you gotta develop that confidence to do it.
Yes.
And that's something I've had to learn to do. Cause I interned at a studio that I think you're familiar with. It's I'm not gonna name names. I interned at a studio in New York that has a very popular online education website. And I was there for about 3 months and I was like, you know what? I work 5 days a week at the coffee shop. I'm doing this the other 2 days. I don't see my girlfriend. I don't got time for this.
Yeah.
Um, I tend to be impatient in those sort of moments because my job was to
Mm-hmm.
clean the bathroom and get coffee. Reasonably so. That was the job of an intern. But I was impatient. I was a little too impatient for being able to get involved.
Mm.
Um, the point of that being is that probably if I had hung around, I would have started picking some of that stuff up.
Yeah, maybe they would have started throwing out some information and giving you some thoughts in the real direction. Yeah, I don't particularly like how they think it takes a certain person, but maybe it just does. You know, I didn't like the expectations even of professional engineers, like, oh, you never sleep, you never eat, you never use the facilities. Why would you? Our client is here and they want to just keep working, so you have to suffer. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, because I don't know who wins from that, really. I just read a book called You Never Tell a Rock Star No,
Oh yeah.
by Glenn Berger. It's fantastic, and it just blew my mind, because there are people that he talks about in there that I thought, oh, if I had just studied under that tutelage. And so many people said they learned from this person, and I would have loved to have learned from him, and blah blah blah. And I had his number, and I called, and I was going to set some stuff up. And yet in his early days, it was pretty awful the way he treated people. And yet then in his own book, he was saying you have to treat people with respect and
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't wait to talk to Glenn Berger and say, did you read his book after yours? Like,
Yeah.
because once
Yeah.
he made it, he was a pretty nice guy, I guess. Like, when I met him, he was great. Like, I can't believe the stories that are in this book. It's just crazy. And which is what is cool is that, he gets into these other things, like all the mind games around it, because it's like, what are we doing all this for? You have to be doing it for the pleasure of it. It's not necessarily for money. It's not necessarily for fame and fortune. It's not necessarily for anything that it's going to mean anything to anybody. It's like, I've always done it because it was like my playground, my toys to play with, my music to create. And I've always loved doing it. So that was the reason I was doing it.
Yeah.
But I've had hangups about all that. What does it mean? Who's it reaching and all that kind of stuff forever. For a while it was like, why aren't you happy? And it's like, oh, I always wanted to write, record, and perform my own music. It's like, well, you're doing that. It's like, I thought it would be different, but like,
Yeah.
how? Like, how would it be different? If it was going to be anything like that book, I was spared. Oh my God.
Yeah. I agree with all the above. I mean, I've had those moments too where I'm like, you know, uh, I'm very proud of everything that has happened thus far, but sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I expect it to look or feel different.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I was just watching, by happenstance through a Instagram, just perusing, see an interview with Rick Rubin, and he was saying essentially like people who are very driven to an end goal, once they achieve the goal, it's kind of like, why am I not happier? And it's like, well, I think the
Mm-hmm.
point being is that the journey is more important than the end result.
Yeah.
I will say, I just want to backtrack a little. I want to say that the studio that I interned at, if anybody deduces where I interned, they were very respectful to me. They were very kind. They allowed me in on what's going on. It's just, I think very understandably so. Uh, I had no practical knowledge of running a board or doing any of these things. So they
Mm.
really smartly did not put me in charge of any of that in my 3-month time there, you know. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I To your point of how we're expected to work all the time,
Mm.
more or less. I think that's increased more so because we're increasingly virtual. We're increasingly working in asynchronous patterns where I send you a mix, then you email me in the middle of the night and I get it in the morning. And, we're not hanging together in the same room doing it
Mhm.
together. And that's challenging. I think the important part is to set boundaries. And that's something I'm for myself am learning to do
Mm.
more and more so because I get a lot of correspondence from a lot of folks from all
Right.
over the place.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it's like if I answer all these emails, I will never get a video out the door. And this is why everybody wants to talk to me.
Right.
So I think just acknowledging the fact that you got to focus on what you do best at and
Mm.
that can give your best at. And sometimes things might not work on the timeline everybody wants, but maybe communicating that fact will will make everybody a little more comfortable.
Yeah, and you'll eventually get to everything, perhaps.
Yeah.
Will you be bringing in other folks to then help? Do you want it to expand and grow even further?
It's something I've thought about and considered. Uh, I'm not opposed to the idea of other people getting involved.
Mm.
I would not say that I'm not one of these folks on YouTube that wants to like turn it into an enterprise or a conglomerate of like we're just cranking out educational materials and courses and doing all these things. And
Mhm.
and I'm not putting those folks down, but I don't know, there's something a little more personal about all this to me,
Yeah,
and I want to just keep it fun. You
definitely.
know, I want to keep it fun, I want to keep it personable and kind and generous. So I don't know, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Um, did you find a way to monetize what you were doing after I suggested that a bunch of years ago?
Yeah, well, I intentionally made a choice when I started the website where I was like, I'm not going to try to pitch anything to anybody for the first year or two because I want to learn if this is actually of value to people, and
Mm,
I want to learn how to be of the best value to other people
mm,
and not be so like me focused. Not to suggest I was a very selfish person, but when
mm.
money's always on your mind, it always kind of, you know, it just kind of skews things a little bit when you're constantly focused on it. And that was something that I had been focused on for a long time, just based on the fact of like, I need to make rent type of thing.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm just going to focus on being helpful. And then eventually, people seem to be attracted to the website and channel. And I've developed a couple courses that I sell,
Excellent.
and I pitch them, you know, once in a while. I go back and forth on the idea because I don't want to be a used car salesman on the internet. I don't feel comfortable with that idea, but I do put a tremendous amount of effort into every video though that goes out the door. I mean, 10 to
Yeah.
20 hours is not even an anomaly in my world going
Wow.
into a video that just goes on YouTube for free.
Yeah.
Um, so I reconcile that fact that like I try to do my best by everybody every time I sit down in front of the camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, uh, I'm open to other ideas as well. Like I've done some content for Isotope and other companies in the past. I kind of like that experience too,
Oh, cool.
but I'm very much I'm one of these individuals who has to work on the thing I'm passionate about. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
become incredibly not fun to be around. And I love Logic Pro so intensely. I'm almost more a Logic Pro fan than I am an Apple fan, though they are neck and neck.
I know what you mean.
I like it so much, and I like helping people with it so much that
Yeah.
so I stick with it. Yeah.
I know it's funny because a lot of times we're several things at once to different people,
Yeah.
you know, and you could be the artist, but you're also the teacher, but you're also making videos, but you have people watching that are virtual, you have people that are in person, you're working on projects with actual bands that come to you and bring you mixes, you're working on mixes from people you've never met. There's a lot of things to juggle, and who are you to each? It's like when somebody is a business person, but they're also a son, but they're also a dad, but they're also a teacher, but they're also like, so there's different ways to be. And I definitely know what you mean by being miserable to be around. It's
Yeah.
like if I don't eat every 2 or 3 hours or get enough sleep, it's like, oh, you're so cranky.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that self-regulation, people don't realize sometimes how much work it is to be in front of so many people to just keep your cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm by nature, I'm very, what's the word? You're extroverted or introverted. I'm by nature extremely introverted.
Me too.
When I'm out in public, people probably wouldn't recognize me if they saw me in public, besides the bald head and the mustache. I mean, I'm not engaging in a lot of conversations. I'm not that talkative out and about.
Hmm.
Um, so it takes a little bit of like, okay, we're filming now, and then I get to it. So it does take for me anyways, a bit of energy to get in the
Yeah.
headspace for this sort of thing, but it's a lot of fun too. It's a lot of fun to see the response from people and being the responses that are like, "Wow, I had no idea how to accomplish this," or "Wow, you saved me so many hours that I was struggling with this."
Mm,
Um, that's definitely the reward
yeah.
for sure.
Well, it's definitely that you're giving folks direct answers. I mean, that's the most beautiful thing, no matter what problem I face, or almost,
Yeah.
uh, even if it's trying to fix something, there's somebody that knows how to do it, and I take a lot of, uh, you know, pleasure in that, like just knowing it's going to be okay. Somebody knows what to do, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would consider you the logic expert. I don't know too many others at all.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that. I can name a few um, contemporaries who have been doing it a lot longer than I have.
Yeah,
I appreciate everything they bring to the table too.
yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
great. Pretty
Yeah.
great. What about you said meditation. I just had Eric Mazel on a couple of days ago, and he's like the creativity coach. He's written over 50 books about the creative process and people and artists and the way we think and how we have to be dedicated to a healthy mind and be only choosing thoughts that serve us. I don't think people realize that they're the only ones thinking in their own brain, and that just because a thought's going by doesn't necessarily mean it's yours. It's like, well, that was a nasty thing to think. It's like, I don't really feel that way. No, I'm not gonna take that one on, or repeat that. It's just something that just floated through. But even talking with my students and stuff, it's like your whole life can happen or does happen between here and here, just in your own head. And whether you're happy or not is a complete inside job as well.
Hmm.
So maybe as I'm getting older, I'm starting to understand these things and practice them a little bit more. But I bet that goes a bit hand in hand with the meditation idea too, just trying to figure out where is my energy right now and what do I really need? Like, meet your own needs.
Yeah. I'm a very gut reaction, kind of reactionary personality where
Hmm.
I immediately feel a thing. Uh, and as soon as I feel it, it just takes over. And
Like, you have to
medit
deal with it.
yeah, or I just have to have a
Yeah.
knee-jerk reaction to it. I've gotten a lot
Hmm.
better as I've gotten older.
Hmm.
Um, but meditation, the thing that it helps me do is just kind of slow the thinking down,
Hmm.
just to be able to take at least a step back and say, okay, like, is this worth dwelling on? Is this worth, is
Good
this
one.
idea something serving you,
Yes.
as you put it? Um, I'm always modulating between feeling like, yeah, I got things and like, oh my God, I've got nothing and going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So meditation helps me
Yeah.
manage that balance.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you know about the still point
No,
in the back of your neck? If you've ever gone for a massage, sometimes they put their fingers right up and they hold the weight of your head. I guess
no.
we have columns in the spinal column, the fluid. When we get really going and the adrenaline's going, or our thoughts are really spinning, there's like fluid going very quickly up and through our nervous system, through the channels back there. And if you just press on the back of your neck when you lay down and do some deep breathing or thinking or even sitting up, you can get that to calm down, and it helps
Huh.
soothe my beast a little bit. And then also EFT tapping is really good. Wonder
Not
if you've ever
familiar.
heard of that. It's called emotional freedom technique. It looks really bizarre. You see people doing this and saying things to themselves. I don't even have to say much. I'm
Mhm.
tapping on my fingers, tapping on my head. You tap around your eye. But there are energy centers in the body. And then if you can release the energy, you feel better as well, because our bodies hold on to everything. I mean, because of all the regulation and all the BS most of us have to put up with constantly.
Mhm.
and what you see out in the world and what you filter and what you react to, because sometimes you can't help but react. There's so many awful things going on. You have to bring yourself back somehow, you know, and you can't let these things like stay in your muscles. I got to go shake it out or take a walk or jog or, like really exert, go play drums for a while.
Absolutely. That's a thing that I'm coming around to as well, that, I'm increasingly am much more stationary,
Mm,
studio, etcetera, and I'm relearning the fact that, like, hanging out in your head all day, it
mm,
is not the healthiest thing, and getting out bicycling, walking, whatever. I think, just kinda working that stuff out
yeah.
physically, like, literally.
Literally, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's different types of meditation too, because I loved that book, Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, where she was talking about Zen and beginner's mind and first thoughts and keep your pen moving. And, you can write, give yourself permission to write the worst stuff in America, but then you can hone it and edit it and turn it into something good. She was thinking I should become a Zen monk, for herself. Like she had a Zen teacher and she was thinking she had to follow in those specific ways of meditating. And her teacher was saying to her, you love to write. You can do writing meditation. You can do walking meditation. Like anything, even drumming for sure could be a meditation. Maybe
Sure.
even making the videos and editing can be a meditation. Like with the right mindset or intention, almost anything you're doing can align your energy and get you back to center again. You just have to almost intend it, or like tune yourself to it somehow, like when they say get in the flow or allow your higher source of energy, like whatever it is that you're responding to it that helps calm you, figure out all those things and get around to them throughout the
Yeah.
day so that you feel. I'd even love naps. It's very easy for me to just kind of hang out with the mini dachshunds and take a nap.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think of, like, creative flow, or,
Yes,
Olympians get into a flow state, uh,
yes,
being present-minded, really, and not having the mind wandering,
right, the monkey
the
mind.
past, the future, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what are some other ways that you get into your flow state? Like, how do you know you're in your flow state, or what do you do? Do you get your favorite pens and papers and special cup of tea, or what helps you get in the zone
That's an
to
interesting
mix or do
question.
anything?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I could even identify that at this point, because it's actually, if I could be candid, it's actually a mighty, effort to get into the state of filming for a video. It's a mighty effort to edit a video. Uh,
Really, every time?
these days these days, it's a monumental effort, not because I don't like it, but,
Mm-hmm. What would you rather be doing? What's easier to get into the zone to do if it's so
writing is actually my preferred method of communicating.
writing your
I
blog?
Yeah, I started out just writing blog posts,
Yes.
and then eventually I came to the conclusion it's kinda hard to illustrate a topic related to audio if you can't hear it, if you can't,
Mm, can't
you
see the
know,
logic
experience
screen.
it. Yeah, so I said, "Okay, I'm gonna do YouTube videos."
Mm,
Um, but I also put, fully candid, I put a lot of pressure on myself to provide as much as I can to people,
mm.
and early on, I would post maybe a 10-minute video and be like, "Okay, that's how you do the thing. There you go." And then, folks reach out with questions like, "But wait, but what about this? And what about this?" And then,
Mm,
so I try to accommodate as much of that as I possibly can, hopefully
that's a
without
lot. That's a
dragging
lot.
it. I know, without dragging it too far along. So now I kind of sit down anticipating I'm going to be in the chair for a bit while I'm filming. I'm going to be sitting here for a while. So that's why I would say it's a bit of an effort, because I have to, like, mentally prepare for that.
Is there a part of you that's saying, but I don't want to sit in the chair for the next 3 hours?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
And what
definitely.
would you rather be doing?
Um, I I very much like being outside these days, just like walking around the neighborhood or whatever. I like that a lot. I like mixing a lot.
Yeah.
That's a very meditative practice because for
Hmm.
me, uh, if I'm not doing a lot of corrective work, like not having to focus too much on uh, pitch correction or drum replacement or something that's like necessary but not ideal for anybody in the room.
Right.
But if I can just focus on EQs and compressors and stuff, I love that. I love poking around at the sounds in Logic and creating little riffs and arrangements with the Novation Launchpad. It's probably the coolest controller ever because you can reach, 8 scales, or excuse me, 8 octaves with a single hand
Hmm.
across all the little blocks. So you can easily play a little ditty with just a single hand
Wow.
up and down the keyboard. It's awesome. Um
But what I was thinking was perhaps you could get to some of the things you want to do first. Like I'll give myself a lot of pressure too for certain things that have to be done and deadlines that are coming up and stuff. But I know me, and in fact, I just as a along the lines of this, I remember reading a book about procrastination, thinking it was going to kick me in the bum and say, get your work done, and just realize, okay, yeah, every expert says you just have to buckle down and do it. But
yeah.
it actually said your brain is smart enough to know that even if though you say you're going to do this for a half hour every day for the next month, that you'd be able to get it done the weekend before if you just do the whole thing then. It's not going to let you do a little bit every day.
Yeah.
Your brain's not going to let you waste time. So it makes more sense now to me to say, I am going to go play guitar for 2 hours. Then I'll get to the taxes, or then I'll get to this or get to that, because then I'm in a good place and flow happens, even for the work that I don't feel like doing. Also, it doesn't feel like it's going to be such a drudgery and it goes a lot easier. So
Yeah.
maybe that's what you need to do first is go out and walk around the neighborhood, then come back in and edit those drums.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely something I've come to the conclusion a little late as well is that my girlfriend of the last 17, 18 years, we share a creative space. She's an illustrator. I do the YouTube
Oh,
channel and video or in music and such. She's a morning person. She's like 9 to 5. That's
wow.
that's her work schedule. Every job I've ever worked, I've worked till 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Oh.
I've never been the morning person, but we come into work at 9 o'clock and I sit here and I'm like, okay, I gotta start filming, but I'm not awake and I won't be awake for the next 3 or 4 hours. So I'm finally just appreciating the fact, like, okay,
Mm,
this is who I am. So I'm gonna go for a walk first, then I'll meditate, and then maybe I'll do a little creative stuff. And then once the juices are kind of like kicking in,
yeah.
all right, now I'll sit down to do a video.
Do you eat when you first wake up?
I do. We're on a diet of the last year. We each gained about 15, 20 pounds over COVID, as as many of folk had done. And we said, this isn't cool. I felt like I had a tire wrapped around me. And so we decided to take on a diet called the slow carb diet. Um,
Huh.
there's a there's a guy named Tim Ferriss who's pretty famous in certain circles, anyways, at this point. He wrote a book called The 4 Hour Work Week and
Oh, I
4 Hour
remember that
Body and
title.
such.
Yeah.
And he had a suggested diet that mainly focused on protein and
Mm.
veggies. And it's like just pick a couple of meals and eat those meals every day. And then on a particular day, you have a cheat day where you go hog wild and eat whatever you want.
Oh, wow.
And we did that. And a couple months later, lost all the weight and we just stuck
Fantastic.
with it. So, yes, we eat a very hearty eggs, beans, kale, or spinach every
Mhm.
morning.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good because for a while I would feel like I wake up, I'm sort of in between being awake and being asleep. I'm not really fully back yet, and I'm not hungry. And I remember hearing people say, don't eat unless you're hungry. So I would wait too long, my blood sugar would drop, and then I had no energy or clarity at all, and I couldn't function. And it's like, no, you need to eat like within the first hour of being awake to get your brain fed and to get your metabolism working. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that at least.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
keeps us full for most of the day. That first meal of the day, it's like It's crazy. You go from eating toast. I go from eating toast every morning with peanut butter.
Mm.
By the time we get to work, I'm like, I'm so hungry right now. What is going on? COVID happens and suddenly I'm like, why am I so much heavier than I used to be? And
Mm.
then we started this diet and now it's like, I don't need to eat till 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon as a
Wow,
result. Yeah, it's crazy.
nice. You found something that works for you. I think
Yeah.
everybody, literally every body is different, and
Yeah.
that's part of knowing yourself as a human, but also as an artist, because you want to know what time of the day you function best and can do your art and your work, and you want to know what fuel helps you get there. You know,
Yeah,
that's really cool.
absolutely. Yeah. It's always a work in progress over here, um but I'm enjoying the
Absolutely.
journey. Yeah.
I know it's like some things I really wish you could just set it and forget it, but nothing is like that.
No,
Everything's in motion.
absolutely.
And you're either chasing after something to get it to come back and get it right, or you're a little bit ahead of it and it's going well. But sometimes I feel like, I'm run over by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what are those things? Like sometimes, you feel like you're on top of the world, like you said, I'm doing all right. And then some days you're like, I don't know anything.
Yeah, I for me, I think I keep coming back to it, but the meditation, it's like
Mm,
when I fall off the practice, that's when those thoughts and feelings start to crop up for me, anyways. And when I'm in a regular practice, I usually do about 20 minutes every morning,
mm.
and that keeps me just at least allowing me to suspend the knee jerk reaction long enough to maybe say, okay, maybe this isn't worth worrying about as much as I typically would.
Nice. When did
Yeah.
you start meditating?
Many years ago, probably my mid 20s, perhaps. I'm 39 now. Mid 20s, I think, using apps on the iPhone. I started with Headspace and then I used just about all of them, Calm, Apple Fitness, because they have
Mm.
meditations. I've landed on the app Balance for right now because
Oh, cool.
I like Apple Fitness, but they always have music playing. And as someone who's very focused on music,
I know.
I cannot like not focus on it. And
Exactly.
Balance, the audio is just there's nothing. It's just silent and a person's voice. Or you can have like rain or something. And that to me is a lot easier because
Me
you
too.
know, it turns into white noise.
I know every time I go for massage, they go, "You want to hear some music?" I'm like, "No, no.
Yeah.
Nature sounds, please." Like,
Yeah.
otherwise, I'm like analyzing the progression, and oh, they must have mic'd it this way, and it just.
Eh,
And what's really interesting is going back and hearing music that you knew of when you were a child, like what that
Mm,
was on the radio in the car when your parents were in charge of the radio, or your very first listening experiences of bands and records. Because if you haven't heard them in 40, 50 years, well, you wouldn't have that many because you're only 39, but you would hear it now with these new ears, with these trained professional ears, but you still sort of hear it as a whole as well, which is really, it's like, really? That's what was in the mix?
yeah.
That's how they got that sound. Oh my God. Like even the beginning intro guitar to Number Nine Dream, the John Lennon tune, where Jesse Ed Davis is playing. Right? I had to
Yeah.
figure that out when I was in a solo Beatles tribute band, and I went, "Oh my God, it's Slide with a wah wah!" It just blew my mind. It was so exciting. It's like I had no
Absolutely.
idea.
Yeah, I can empathize with that. You know what's interesting? I never grew up with my entire childhood. My mom is deaf, so she wasn't
Oh,
listening to music, and my dad
right.
was only exclusively listening to classical and like Irish folk music. It's weird now because now I go over and he's listening to like Florence and the Machine, and I'm like, what the hell? Why was this not happening when I was here? But so I never had the experience of listening to like AC/DC or
Yeah.
like classic rock or 80s pop or anything like that. And
Mm.
now maybe because maybe I'm going through a midlife crisis or something, but now like I'm like hearing music on the radio from those eras, and I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I love
Mhm.
hearing the guitar tones and like
Yeah.
AC/DC, Black Sabbath, or I love hearing the poppy, just effortlessness of Madonna from the 80s.
Mm.
Just all that stuff, it's hitting me now. And then listening to music that I grew up on, which was largely like punk rock because I adopted that from my friend circles in middle school and
Mm.
high school, and hearing those after many years of being away and being like, "Wow, I just can't imagine the depth of the mix of a Kid Dynamite song in their Shorter, Faster, Louder record." Like,
Mm.
a lot of contemporaries or a lot of modern stuff feels almost flatter. And it's
Yeah.
like, you hear the drums, you hear the guitars, you hear the bass, but everything feels like it's plastered against the wall. And listening to some
Right.
of those records, it's like,
They're
I feel like
breathing.
the drummer is back there. He's
Yeah.
behind the guitars. He's behind the basses. The vocalist is over here. I don't know. There's a whole different depth.
Yeah. Different depth and breathing and aliveness that it because it seemed like they were working with broader strokes back then.
Yeah.
Whether everybody was in the room recording at once or not, they still had very few things that they could do to manipulate the sound. Now I feel like we get too detailed with too many plugins and we futz around too much. And for me, I've definitely ruined things that when I go back to some of my earlier albums, I go, you didn't worry about this then. And look how good that sounds. Why are you doing that to this whatever,
To your point, and I think probably to maybe the point of like universal audio and how a lot of their plugins emulate older gear. When you would you and this is me speculating or me assuming, but when you would record to tape through the EQ and the compressor, not only are you EQing, a little top end and a little less 400 hertz, but
Mm,
there's the sound of the unit, and there's if you're pushing that unit a little too hard, you're kind of getting that gluey nature of the unit. And there's a lot more happening than
yes.
just an EQ curve.
Yes.
And so by happenstance, and also the fact that there are many folks who are probably very familiar with their gear and the way that they work, but almost by happenstance, these other effects are happening and adding to the sound without you having to try, without each of us having to try so hard to make that sound happen.
Absolutely right. And then every plugin can distort the stereo image and throw
Yeah.
off the phasing of things. So it's like, oh,
I
better to capture a good sound on the way in.
absolutely. That's something I have come a long way around to figuring out.
Mm,
I think a lot of folks on YouTube, a lot of blogs, myself included, we get really excited by the mix stage. And I
mm,
think a lot of folks have questions about the mix stage because it seems like that's where a lot of the magic happens.
mm-hmm.
Many, you know, decade or two later, it's like, oh, just find out the right place to put the SM57 in front of the guitar cab, find the right tone on the amp head, play that, play a couple takes so you have some, you can cobble together something that sounds fantastic the whole way through. 90% of the work just happened at
Yeah.
that stage. And then
Yes.
you don't need a million peak filters on an EQ to clean it up.
No, no.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Every great engineer I speak to, that's everybody's advice. Get it sounding great on the way in. I always almost feel like there's like a translation that happened from 2004 to 2005, going from analog to digital. And I have uh, memories or flow memories of almost like romance memories of it worked so much better then. It was easier then. But then it's like, no, because when you had to offset those ADAT machines, it was a lot of math to lengthen a song or to shorten a song or to cut out the bridge. And it was like, I don't even remember how I did all that stuff. And it's so easy with cut and paste in Logic, but does it sound as good? So you go back and forth like, was it better then? No, things I think were better and worse, and they're better and worse now, but they're different things. And I'm still trying to sort out which way do I like to work best and how should I normal the patch bay? Maybe I'm not just doing the IO anymore. Maybe I should do it this way and redo that. And it's, I may end up just simplifying things
Yeah,
and
that's
selling a lot of stuff,
that's an effort that I'm always working towards. I routinely challenge myself to only use the plugins in Logic for mixing.
Nice.
Um, I always end up going back to the same plugins over and over when I have a particular situation that needs to be corrected.
Hmm.
Like Logic doesn't have a dynamic EQ, and sometimes you need dynamic EQ,
Yeah.
or in, or perhaps I need to line up multi-mic drums so the phase is better. And you could
Mm-hmm.
do it in Logic, but it's a lot of almost like chasing your tail to get it done. I'll just use the third party plugin instead.
Auto
But
align.
yeah, yeah. Soundradix's auto align 2 is freaking magic. I didn't like the first version. I actually preferred Melda Productions
Oh,
M auto align, but auto align 2 from Radix is like on a whole nother level.
nice.
But the I think simplifying ends up being the way to go.
Yeah.
Is just agreeing with yourself to avoid certain tools for as long as you can, agree with yourself to avoid certain tactics for as
Mm.
long as you can, um, and only turning to those things when you just are like, "I'm not gonna achieve the result I want without it." But I
Mm.
think it's good to challenge oneself to simplify, to be a minimalist in these departments because you can end up chasing your tail for a long time or,
Yeah.
um, getting very perfectiony about details.
And
Uh,
spending too many months even just hooking things up and trying to figure out how to get things to talk to each other. It's like,
yeah.
this isn't music.
Yeah, right.
So I'm always amazed at how much we can communicate even with our dogs and our cats
Yeah.
without words. It's fascinating how they tell you what they want, and how we could know just by looking at them like, oh, this or that. But
My mom is very good at it too. I mean, even when I try to sign to her in my staggered, not very good way, she'll just look at my face and she'll just read what I'm saying as I'm
hmm
speaking it because it's probably easier for her at this point
yeah.
than to watch me struggle.
Well, you all in the family too must have your own connection, obviously, that is a lot more subtle than
Yeah.
most people's. So you're paying some really good focused attention on each other and you're picking up on each other's energies and cues and body language and all these things that we might not even have words for in the moment, but that got the message across.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even heart energy, like we can tell when someone is sincere.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
That's really
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another question about the backwards iPhone. I love
Yeah.
like you're using a mic too. So
Yes.
you're looking at the back of a an iPhone and that's doing your Zoom call
Yep.
and your microphone's hooked into your interface, but how are they hooked together that I'm hearing the mic with the iPhone? You're going through ScreenFlow,
No, I'm going through Zoom's audio and video preferences.
but the
So,
phone is able to hook up to another mic as well.
um, they're separate devices. So in Zoom, in the video preferences, I'm able to select my phone as
Right.
the camera source.
Okay.
And then for the audio device, I'm able to say my audio interface. I'm using a couple intermediary or go between virtual devices. I'm using Reincubate's Camo for the camera,
Oh,
which is what I use for my videos as well.
what's it doing?
It's just a different approach to the camera feed. Prior to Mac OS Ventura, you couldn't select your iPhone as a camera source.
Ew.
So I had to use this separate application. I think it was Mac OS Ventura when they finally said, like, yeah, you can use your iPhone as a computer camera,
Mm-hmm.
something that seemed like so obvious so long ago, but probably took time to make it all happen. And then I'm using Rogue Amoeba's loopback device as the input source. So basically I'm saying like, all right, the input from my interface is going into loopback, which is going into Zoom. The only reason this is the case is that because my Apogee interface preamp levels are digitally controlled, the
Oh.
moment I use something like Zoom,
Mhm.
Zoom wants to start playing with all the preamp levels.
Yeah.
So with Rogue Amoeba's loopback, I create like a little firewall essentially, like stop messing with my stuff. And it works.
Well, it's brilliant. It looks great, sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you. Been
Yeah.
a
That was a lot to think through. How did that even you probably just had to do a lot of research to sort all that out.
Yeah, yeah, I wish I could remember the kid's name. There was a YouTuber who said, "You know what? I use these Mac apps for various situations, and I use Loopback when I'm doing Zoom calls with people that he basically like does something similar. He helps them with their mixes or their technical issues over Zoom."
Oh,
I was
right.
like, "That's very interesting because I have a hard time trying to figure out how to get audio from Logic to pass through Zoom
Mhm.
and my microphone, but still be able to hear everything." So Loopback ended up being a really helpful tool to manage these different aspects because Zoom's gotten has most of it figured out, but some stuff, like
Mm.
if I set the audio driver to the Zoom driver in Logic, I cannot hear any audio over my speakers.
Right.
And maybe someone way smarter out there who will watch this will be like, "Chris, duh, you're supposed to do this," but I haven't figured it out yet. So
So you're listening, yeah, because I'm coming through your speakers.
yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. So loopback is like an alternative to audio movers or one of those.
Absolutely. Like Soundflower. Do you remember that? It was like
No.
it's basically like a virtual or software audio interface. It's
Hmm.
like pretend Loopback is just another box on your desk and you can route audio in and out of it and to other
Okay.
places, like a patch bay.
That was a hardware thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
But Loopback is a software-based thing. I was just
Mm.
expressing it as a piece of hardware, hopefully that it would make a
Oh,
little more
okay.
sense. Yeah.
This is such cool stuff. And no matter what you do, it's going to change and it's going to upgrade and it's going to go up another couple of K for quality. And,
Yeah.
I mean, for the longest time, my Canon T3 was like, wow. Now everybody's like, we have a better camera in our phone. Oh,
Yeah. Well, just literally the other day, I opened Camo, the app that I use to get my camera feed from my phone,
Mm.
and update. We finally will up until then it had always been in 1080, even though the iPhone camera can do 4K.
Mm-hmm.
Like, update, we can do 4K now. It's like, awesome. Now I won't look like I won't look like I'm blurring into the background in my videos anymore. This is great.
I know. Yeah, your
Yeah.
video looks incredible.
Thanks. Thanks.
I'm blending into my background, but at least I don't disappear because it's not, like when you just use a filter and your
Yeah.
thing disappears.
Yeah. I'm digging. You have some are those Atom speakers in the background?
Which ones are those?
They're
Yes.
under yeah.
Yeah. There's some Adams there, some NS10s, some Vantone, and over here I have some Mackies.
Yeah, you got quite the operation over there.
It's pretty crazy.
It's awesome.
It's cool though. It's fun. I mean, a lot of things have come and gone over the years, but so far this is where we are today.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I just love it. This has been so fun. I mean, you've been so generous with your time, and I love all the different things we've gotten into. Is there anything we haven't gotten into that you wish we'd circle back to?
Mm, not especially.
Food,
I just hope
meditation, audio,
yeah, I mean, hopefully
staying sane.
just hopefully anybody watching this feels compelled to check out more. Uh every week I'm focused intently on trying to help people out.
Yeah.
But
And
no,
I would think a lot of your videos would be helpful even if you don't use logic, because you're very, I was going to say logical about playing with sound, but you do great things with sound. You have great solutions, and whatever plugin or DAW you're using, there's a compatible way to do it.
yeah, I appreciate that, and I hear that. I hope it comes off that way for other folks. I won't be offended if folks of other DAWs don't feel similar. It
Mm.
makes sense to me. Um, but they should give Logic a try. That's
Mm.
something I'm quite passionate about. If you're on a Mac, give it a try because whatever your impression is of Logic Pro from 10 years ago, it's quite a different world now for us
Yeah,
Logic users.
yeah, super helpful, super cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I
This was
appreciate
super
you
cool.
reaching out to me. And
It's been so fun for me to meet you finally.
absolutely.
You're super cool and super helpful. I love your website. Love the podcast. Podcast. I love that you're on my podcast. Love your blog, and certainly love your YouTube channel.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's been a real pleasure to meet face to face finally because we've been corresponding back and forth for a few years now.
Mm,
And it's it's just fun to hang out with other creative people, you
it
know?
really is, and I've needed it for my whole life. So I'm really happy that you said yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll meet in person in real life at some point as well.
That could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
All right. Well, take care
You
and let
too.
me know when this goes live.
Yes, probably in a day or two.
Awesome. I'll share it too. I'll share it
Okay.
via the email list. So
Okay, great.
few people will hear about it for sure.
That's lovely.
Okay.
I would love for them to hear more and broaden their thoughts about you. So that'll be great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Chris.
All right. Take care.
Ciao.